What's going on, guys? Danimal here, and I'm back with another quickfire guide. This time we have the Kar 98. The attachment... Wait, what? Oh, sorry. We have the musket. Now, the three abilities that we will be using for the musket are heavily into the sharpshooter tree. We have powder burn, power shot, and shooter stance. And now for the additional points for the abilities. For powder burn, we have backdraft. The standard musket shots deal 12% additional fire damage while the target is on fire. This is good because you'll be landing more shots into the opponent straight after this, especially if you're going to use shooter stance. Once you've used powder burn, you can really get off some quick fire extra damage. The 12% additional damage just adds that additional pressure. Next, we have chronic trauma. If powder burn is a headshot, it extends the burn duration to 13 seconds. This gives us an extra 4 more ticks. This is actually almost a full shot from the musket itself, so this is damn worth getting, especially as this build is mostly based around hitting headshots, and the main skill of this build will be landing them head popping shots. Cue headshot. Headshot. Next, we have Power Shot. We'll be filling this out, starting with Initial Engagement. When you hit with Power Shot, you gain in power, causing all attacks to deal 10% additional damage for 5 seconds. There's a lot of power buffing in this build, especially around hitting headshots. So an additional 10% damage from Initial Engagement. This is going to just help your damage from range even more. Next, we have First Blood. 10% additional damage to targets with full health. Now, this makes sense to keep Power Shot as your main loaded weapon when starting a fight. You should always just lock and load it in whenever you can, because the buff stays there until fired. So ideally, when you see someone, you want to open with this, especially with a headshot. And this is going to give you an additional 10% damage against those targets with full health, and it's going to double up, especially if you have an Onyx inside your gun. Lastly, we have Bullseye. Power Shot's cooldown is reduced by 15% when you hit a headshot. It's just synergizing with the rest of the headshotting in the build. And the last skill we have is Shooter Stance. We're only going to fill the first talent out for Shoot More. The shots fired by this ability is up from 3 to 5. This is just a quality of life. If you have the time to settle down and get into this stance, which you will, you can just manage to get off 5 shots instead of 3, and it's just a lot more DPS as the shots are firing quicker. Now for the filler talents around the tree, starting with empowering headshot. On successful headshot. Okay, I promise we'll stop doing that now. It's going to grant you Empower, increasing your musket shots damage by 10% for 5 seconds. Once again, this increases damage on headshot. You want to be hitting headshots, following into more headshots to deal even more damage, and then keep the ball rolling with damage and rolling out as much range DPS as you possibly can. Next, we have Ballistic Advantage. This removes the fall off the standard musket shots, meaning you'll do more damage from further away. This is key to this build. This is played like a sniper. It's not played like the bow, where you want to be in the mid-drift, trying to fire arrows and actually land them with the slow flight time. With the musket, you want to be further away. You want to be papping headshots in from afar, and the rest of the talent points are going to help with that range. But this talent really turns you into an absolute ranged beast, and probably the best ranged DPS in the game. Next, we have Heightened Precision. While aiming, successful hits with the musket grant a stackable 2.5% damage increase. This effect ends when the player stops aiming down sight or more than 5 seconds passes between shots. This can only go up to a maximum of 6 stacks. This synergizes quite nicely with the Shooter Stance. This means you're going to be able to stack that damage up, especially when you've got the 5 shots going off. If you're sat in the back line, you're hiding in a bush and you're opening on someone and you really want to shoot them down, you're going to get that stackable buff. This works especially nicely if you're in a mass PvP situation. You're being able to sit in the back line, hiding a little bit, and you're shooting their backline, especially with people with full health as well. You're going to be dealing out so much range damage with all of these buffs, especially if you're hitting those headshots. Next, we have Hit Your Mark. Increase headshot and critical damage the further away the target player is. This goes up to a maximum of 15% up to 100 meters away. This does not forgo fall off damage. Now, we've already had our fall off damage buffed by Ballistic Advantage, but this just gives you even more potency in the build. The further you are away, you'll be able to outrange mostly every single ranged DPS in the game except for the other muskets. So actually, you get rewarded for being further away, and if you can pick up a nice position, especially in multi PvP, you're going to be able to really lay some damage into your opponent. And the last talent in this sharpshooter tree, we have Sniper. This is the bread and butter of the build. This is what makes the musket absolutely amazing. This adds a 3x zoom onto your aimed shots. You use the mouse wheel to scroll it up and down while aiming. It also grants 15% additional damage to all your headshots, just really smoothing off that headshot synergy. And as it says on the actual talent, it turns you into a sniper. Now we move over to the Trapper tree for the last 5 talents, starting with Salt on the Wounds. You get 10% increased damage on targets below 30% health. This just adds that little bit of extra danger. When someone's perhaps low health and trying to run away from you, you hit them with a headshot sub 30%, they're definitely going to die, especially with power shot combined. Next, we have Empowering Weakness. Hitting a target with an active debuff triggers Empower. This increases the damage by 5% for 5 seconds. You're always going to try and have your powder burn on. This is going to be your debuff. You're just going to get a flat 5% damage increase. It's just adding to more empowerment in this build. After that, we have Hustle. After you dodge, you gain haste, increasing your movement speed by 10%. This is just like the bow ability. It just adds that extra little bit of survivability, especially if you're getting jumped or something. You can just dodge. You can be a little bit faster than the other players. Realign yourself. Pull out your melee weapon, which I suggest using with the musket, especially this build because it's a sniper build, and you can get your survival on, react, and start fighting. Next, we have Tactical Reload. Dodging reloads the musket. This can only trigger once every 6 seconds. This is just quality of life, and it's better than the other talent point. Energy Burst. You're not going to be using stamina really when you're using this gun. You shouldn't be getting hit and using your musket, so you don't really have a reason to use stamina so much. Whereas Tactical Reload was actually quite nice. You can get off some quite good double shots with it, so you can literally just shoot, dodge, reload, shoot, and you might be able to get like a double headshot. It's someone like closing in on you or running away, and it's just really nice to have like a quick reload in the build. And lastly, kick them when they're down. You deal 10% damage to targets affected with a crowd control status, which counts as slow, root, and stun. Now, this is important to realize that you might be thinking, well, there's no slows in this build. There's not really anything that's going to root. There's nothing that's going to stun. How does this synergize with the entire build? Well, there is a perk that I suggest is probably the best perk to use for the musket. Now, this talent point you should really only take when you've got that perk. You might want to put it into something else if you don't have it, but that perk is the Crippling Powder Burn perk. This adds a slow onto your powder burn, which then helps you get that 10% extra damage on targets with slows. Now, because there isn't a slow in this, it is really handy to have that powder burn slow. It will help you hit your shots a lot more, but it will also give you that 10% increased damage. And I just thought overall I wanted to mention that because the synergy is really, really nice. And that rounds the talents off for the musket. As for playstyles with this build, do not, and I'm going to repeat this again, do not, I'm going to put it up on screen, do not try and fight at close range with this weapon. This is purely a sniper weapon. This is a full ranged weapon. This is best coupled with a melee weapon, or even maybe the bow if you want to use the close range bow build, the one that I just released. You can go watch that. But to reiterate, you do not want to fight up close with this. This is purely used for ranged DPS and good ranged DPS. Personally, I love to couple this with a spear. The rapier would definitely be excellent with it too. So you can annihilate people from afar. You can annihilate people who come close to you. If you wanted to preliminary play it, you could probably couple it with a support hatchet, which I'll release in the near future. Even with a sword and board to try and get you away and escape. And I will release a support sword and board dex kind of build as well. Now, like I said, once you've mastered the one rule, which is always fight from range with this weapon, you want to start hitting your shots. Now, you want to get consistent at just actually hitting the shots. I wouldn't worry too much about headshots at the beginning, but those of you who have FPS skills, who know they're aiming for the neck head area and they have like kind of natural crosshair placement, always hit those headshots. This is like the number 2 rule. Number 1 rule, stay at range. Number 2, try and hit your headshots. So for those of you who actually want to improve your aim, there are actually resources that you can use. aimtrainer.io is a free website that you can use to train all different types of aim. I would suggest doing target tracking and moving targets, possibly reflex too. These will all help you with your playstyle in New World. Also, if you want to try it in real time, Valorant is actually free. This is not a hashtag ad. Just want to add that. Valorant is a free-to-play team shooter, and yeah, it will just really help with your awareness and actual crosshair placement. Number 3, if you can't hit your headshots, just settle for body shots until you get better. And rule number 4 is that this is a gun. You point, you shoot, they take damage. Unless you miss. But you're going to get good with this. So how would I build this while leveling? Well, I'd go for Power Shot, Powder Burn, Backdraft, Chronic Trauma. I'd then pick up Shooter's Stance and then the Shoot More talents after that. I'd then get Ballistic Advantage, so I get rid of the drop-off. Pick up Empowering Headshots, because now I've started hitting headshots more. Fill the rest of Power Shot out. Hit Heightened Precision, hit your mark, get Sniper. Move over to the other tree and work your way down with Salt on the Wounds, Empowering Weakness, Hustle, Tactical Reload, and kick them while they're down. Lastly, like I mentioned before, if you've not got the slow and you don't want to use kick them while they're down, have a look at some of the other talents, see what takes your fancy. But I would probably suggest going for either weakened defenses to increase the stamina damage and or armor penetration if they're not blocking. Or go for greater accuracy so you can actually have some hip fire if you wanted to try and hit off some powder burns up close. But personally, end game, if I've got the right perk on there, kick them while they're down. If not, I'd go for weakened defenses just to supplement a little bit more armor penetration and do a little bit of extra damage because I don't have the slow on this weapon. So there we have it, guys. There's the musket build. You become an absolute sniping machine with it. So if you haven't noticed already, I play Dex as a main, and that's all of the Dex builds covered in these quick guides. What I plan to do next is making the hatchet and the sword as kind of like a support Dex build. But mainly what we have coming up next is my actual proper full end game build that I'll be using for PvP, which includes my spear and my musket. So if you want to look out for those, hit the sub button, hit the notifications, and you'll get notified that when it comes in the next coming week. Lastly, I will be covering my Dex PvE build as well at some point, which will come a few weeks just after the PvP. Currently, I don't plan to switch over to strength or int, but I can kind of come up with some theory and some theory crafting, so I might do some theory crafting videos on those in the future too. So I hope you guys liked it. Give it a thumbs up. And the last thing to say is, I hope you stay happy, healthy, and have a good evening, day, afternoon, morning, whatever you're doing, and I'll catch you in the next video.